right, did everybody get an outline this morning? I think everybody did. Let's go to Matthew 24. And looking at the abomination of desolation. And part of the reason we were looking last couple weeks, or last week, at Luke 21 is because the events of Luke 21, where he describes Jerusalem being compassed with armies and the desolation of Jerusalem, where Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in 70 A.D., is often confused with the abomination of desolation. Those that hold to a preterist view or some sort of a historicist view of Bible prophecy, they often merge these two concepts together, and they're not the same thing. Because in Luke 21, he says, Jerusalem is compassed with armies, and then you know it's time to get out of the city. Those that are in Jerusalem need to leave. And they're going to come in, they're going to kill you with the sword, they're going to lead you captive into all nations and various things like that. Here in Matthew 24, the sign is not Jerusalem being compassed with armies. The sign in Matthew 24 is the abomination of desolation in the holy place, or in the temple. And that's the sign for those that see that event take place, that now it is time to flee into the wilderness. And so we're going to look at this probably at least 3 weeks, because there's 3 parts to this that we need to look at. And today, mostly, we're just going to look at this concept of the abomination of desolation. This is the event where the Antichrist is actually going to declare himself to be God, where the Antichrist is going to come into Jerusalem. He's going to go into the temple. He's going to declare himself to be God. This is going to be the place where, you remember, and we'll look at it next week, I think. You remember in Revelation chapter 13, you have the Antichrist that comes out and he stands on the sea. And then you have another beast that comes out of the earth, and that's the false prophet. And that false prophet is going to make an image to the beast, and he's actually going to give life to that image of the beast. And that's when the mark of the beast comes out and all that stuff. So we'll be talking about that over the next couple of weeks. But this is that event. And so what we're going to look at today is establishing what exactly is taking place and how this is able to come about. So Matthew 24, verse number 15. When he therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, even since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So, this is Jesus' description of the Great Tribulation. This is going to be the last 3.5 years. And we're going to look over the next couple weeks into the book of Revelation, just kind of get a better feel of what's going to take place. Because there's some things here that relate particularly to the Jewish people, but we also want to have a little bit broader understanding of how this plays out and kind of fill in a few of the details. But in particular today, we're going to focus in on verse number 15. And so you notice here in your notes, in Matthew 24, Jesus is describing the tribulation, or the 70th week of Daniel. That's what we've been looking at. So we finished up the first 3.5 years. That's called the beginning of sorrows, back in verse number 8. And so now we're moving into the Great Tribulation. That's the second half. Luke's account focuses on the events that will take place before all these. So you remember that in Luke's gospel, Jesus begins to describe these events, and he describes it just as it is here in Matthew for the most part, where he says there will arise false Christs, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, there will be famines, pestilences, earthquakes, and fearful sights in the heavens. And then Jesus says, but before all these. And then he goes into a description of the events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. So the events of the destruction of Jerusalem take place before what Jesus is describing here. And that is such an important key to understanding this portion of Scripture. If you don't catch those words, and it's just a few words, right? But before all these, 4 words, it will change your entire view of Bible prophecy. It'll change your entire view of the New Testament. And that's something that 4 words can make such an impact. That's why we need to be careful of every single word. That's what we need to focus on. What do the words say? Because every word of God is pure. So we want to focus and pay attention and not miss the words. Okay, so in Luke 21, the focus is on the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. This account of Matthew focuses on the events that will take place at the end of the last days. And here comes your blank. This period may be divided into 2 equal segments. There is the beginning of sorrows, which is verses 5 through 14, and Great Tribulation, which is verses 15 through 28. Those are the 2 segments. And the Great Tribulation is going to be upon the Jewish people and is also going to be upon the world. And where a lot of people get things wrong is they associate the word with persecution. And while it is used that way, I mean, believers face tribulation. We're persecuted. We face hardships. But the way it is used here, it's interesting because the word that Jesus uses here means to squeeze or put in distress. It's actually what Jesus uses in John chapter 16 and verse 21 to speak of the anguish of childbirth as a woman is in that hard labor giving birth to a child. And so this is what Jesus is speaking of here. So you have the beginning of sorrows or the beginning of labor pains, and now you have the extreme anguish of that labor as a child is being brought into the world. That's what's being described here in these 2 parts. So these will be global events that intensify in the same way as labor pains on a woman with child. This period of great tribulation is the hardest and most intense of the labor pains. Because this event here, as you get into the second half of the tribulation, we'll look at over the next couple of weeks in the book of Revelation, we find that the entire power grid is going to be wiped out. That anything that uses electricity is going to become unusable at some point during this Great Tribulation. Now, let me ask you, how well is the world going to handle not having any type of electricity? I mean, we're 100%, almost 100% dependent on it. And for the most part, our lives are wrapped up in these little electronic devices that we carry around in our pockets. And if you were to take people's cell phones away from them, people would begin to go into convulsions and start twitching and stuff like that from the stress of it. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But we've become totally dependent upon them. I mean, what would you do when you sit down to a meal without your cell phone? Isn't it funny? I mean, people go out to restaurants and they're sitting across from each other and they don't even talk to each other. They'll text back and forth and they don't even acknowledge each other's presence. But I mean, that's the world in which we live in. And one of these days, God's going to take that all away. Cars aren't going to work. When he describes that there's going to be bows and arrows, swords and spears and people riding on horses, it's because nothing works. It's actually going to go back to that way. The Great Tribulation is going to send the world back into the Stone Age. It's going to be great to watch, for us anyway. So let's look at this here. The abomination of desolation. What does he mean? Let's look here, verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso reads, let him understand. And now watch what this begins. Drop down to verse 21. Then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So Jesus is saying, this period of time, these last 3.5 years, the second part of the tribulation, is going to be the hardest time that the planet will ever see. Now that's pretty impressive, because he says, such as was not since the beginning of the world. Well, I think Noah's flood would be pretty destructive. Pretty stressful. I think that might have brought some distress on the world, and Jesus says this period of time is going to be worse than that. In fact, he says it's going to be so bad that if it continues any longer than these 3.5 years, no flesh will be saved. See, 8 people were saved in the flood. It would be worse than that. Nobody would live. So I mean, this is going to be intense, and he says there's not going to be another time after this that's as bad either. This is going to be the single worst event that this planet will ever face. So what is this? So let's look at this. The abomination of desolation is the event that begins the Great Tribulation. Jesus tells us that if we want to understand the abomination of desolation, then the key is the book of Daniel. So let's go over to the book of Daniel and let's look at this. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 9, and then we're going to look some in Daniel chapter 11. Book of Daniel. And Jesus says, whoso readeth, let him understand. Talking about the book of Daniel. So the book of Daniel is an important book to understand. Jesus commands us to understand it. So this abomination of desolation is a technical term. It appears, the word desolation does not always mean destroyed, though it can be used that way. So Jesus in Luke 21 speaks of the desolation of Jerusalem. Well, it was destroyed, and it was totally leveled. In fact, the Romans came in later and literally buried the entire city and built another city on top of it. And so it was a total destruction of the city. But it doesn't always mean that. So in some contexts, it means wasted and forsaken. So like if you go into a ghost town where the buildings are falling apart because it's been abandoned for whatever reason, that city is desolate. It's just wasted. It's abandoned. It's good for nothing. You can't use it anymore. Or you could go to Hiroshima after the bomb was dropped on it, and that place was a desolation as well. It was completely destroyed. So it fits in both contexts because it is wasted and forsaken, but for different reasons. So the expression abomination of desolation has a consistent meaning, and it's referred to 3 times in the book of Daniel. So we're going to look at this, and it becomes more clear as you look at all 3 of these events. So Daniel chapter 9, let's look here at verse 24. Passages we've looked at already, but let's just to kind of get the context. So he says, verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Now, what he's describing there in those verses, these things that he refers to that are going to take place at the end of these 70 weeks, refers to the complete and total restoration of Israel to Jehovah God. It is going to be the time when they will actually be saved, when their sins personally as a nation are going to be taken away, and they are going to anoint the Lord Jesus to be their Messiah. That's what he's referring to in this event. So none of that has taken place yet. Jesus has died to provide these things, but you and I are the beneficiaries of it more than Israel is. All Israel has not yet been saved. But it's going to happen at the end of this. That's what he's describing here. So he says, verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, so the 69 weeks. The street shall be built again, the wall even in troublous times. So that 69th week ended when Jesus rode into Jerusalem just prior to his giving the Olivet Discourse. So the Olivet Discourse takes place at the end of that day as he leaves the temple. So we read down here, verse 26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. So after the 69th week, Messiah is cut off. He dies. He's killed, but not for himself. And the people, now this is such a key phrase, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now notice how that's worded. He says the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Who came and destroyed the city and the sanctuary? The Romans did. So that's the people, the Romans. So this prince that shall come is going to come from the Roman Empire somehow. He's going to be part of a Roman Empire. Okay? So that's important to catch that, because watch how this works out. Prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with the flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Who's the antecedent of he? It's the prince that shall come. So this is after the city is destroyed. This prince is going to come, and he's going to confirm a covenant. He's not going to make a covenant. He's going to confirm a covenant. Meaning that the covenant's already in place. So I think this is the Abrahamic covenant. He's giving the land to Israel that Abraham said they were going to get, and this is what he has to maintain through war, as we've looked at already. So he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Now watch this. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Okay? So after the 69 weeks, at some point, this prince that shall come is going to come, and for the last 7 years, that final week, he's going to confirm a covenant. But in the end of the week, he's going to do something that causes a desolation within Jerusalem. He's not going to destroy the city, but he's going to do something that will make it desolate, that will make it unholy, that will make it useless for the Jewish people. Now, can we know what this is? Yes. So let's look over to chapter 11. We're going to look at another prophecy. And as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, Daniel chapter 11 records all the events of the silent years. You know, between the Old and New Testament, there's what's called the 400 silent years. Well, they're not very silent. There's a lot that's going on in those 400 years. They're silent because there's no prophecy. God is not openly speaking to his people, Israel, during that time. But what is taking place is all these events that are taking place in Daniel chapter 11. Now, as we come towards the end of Daniel chapter 11, well, I guess a little more the middle, we have an account of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, he's a Greek ruler in the years 175 to 164, and he's just kind of getting in trouble with everybody around him. He wants to destroy Egypt, but then Rome is beginning to develop at that time as an empire, and they're coming to power, and they stop him from going to Egypt with ships. They have a navy, and so they stop his plan to destroy and take over Egypt. And so instead of going to Egypt, he decides, because he has made a promise with the people of Israel, he decides to go into Israel, and he's going to take over Israel because they're defenseless, they're smaller, they're weaker, and so he's going to go into Israel, and he's going to take over. And so this is what we read in verse 30. So now this is about Antiochus Epiphanes. For the ships of Chittim, that's talking about Rome, that's what it was called before it became Rome, shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. Now that holy covenant there, it's hard to know 100% if he's talking about a covenant that he has made with the Jewish people or if he's talking about the old covenant. It doesn't seem to necessarily be the old covenant, but it could be. But either way, he has indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. And arms shall stand on his part, so his army, and shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. That's talking about the temple. And shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So there's our phrase, the abomination of desolation. Now, what did Antiochus Epiphanes do? Well, here in the description, this is only a few of the things. It's much worse than what's even described here. But he stops the sacrifices for the Jewish people. He comes into the city. He demands that they stop the sacrifices to Jehovah God. He offers a pig on the altar, which makes it unholy for Jewish worship. So this causes the ceasing of all Jewish worship in Jerusalem because a pig is unclean. I mean, the worst thing you could possibly do is bring a pig into Jerusalem, but especially then to offer it up. And then inside the temple, in the Holy of Holies, he takes and he erects a statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies. Then he turns the priest chambers that are in the temple, the rooms in the sides of the temple, into brothels with prostitutes. And the sanctuary was polluted and made abominable to the Jewish people. They can't use it anymore. And as you read down through here, what happens, and you've heard of the Maccabees, especially if you've been Catholic. In fact, I noticed in my Bible when I was studying this, the King James originally had, when it was first put out in the middle, it had the apocryphal book. So it had like First Maccabees and Second Maccabees and stuff like that. Well, they were put there for historical purposes, not because they thought it was Scripture. But in my Bible, they actually have some of the cross-references for Maccabees in there. They forgot to take them out. Oops. But they're there nonetheless. So I thought that was interesting. And so that's recorded there. And what happens is Judas Maccabeus goes in, and he leads a revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes. And Antiochus Epiphanes actually eventually dies, and they go through, and over a period of time, they sanctify once again the temple for religious use, where they can use it again. But notice here, this is a pattern for the Antichrist. When we come down to verse 35 here, the scene is going to change. We're giving an indication here in verse 35 that what has taken place is a picture of something that is going to take place in the future. He says in verse 35, "And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end." Watch, "because it is yet for a time appointed." So he says this is for something that's going to take place later on. Watch verse 36. "And the king shall do according to his will." Now up to this point it's been about Antiochus Epiphanes. And we know that because Antiochus Epiphanes fulfilled everything that was there to a T. I mean, you can look it up and you can find dates for every single thing that's recorded there and exact descriptions of the events. But what takes place after was not done by Antiochus Epiphanes. This is something totally different. In fact, none of this that's written fits anything about Antiochus Epiphanes. So he says, verse 36, "And the king," so this is about a future king, "shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods." Who's the God of gods? Our God. He's the God of all gods. So this king is going to come in. He's going to exalt himself above every god. And he's going to speak against the God of gods. He's going to speak against the God of the Hebrews. He's going to speak against the Christian God. Watch this. "And shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done." What's that indignation? That's God's wrath upon this world. He's going to prosper for 3.5 years. In fact, he's going to tell us that. Watch this. "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women. And as we've said, there's some dispute on what that desire of women is. It could be a reference to Jesus, that he's not going to regard Jesus, which that's a possibility because the desire of Jewish women was to be the mother of Messiah. Or it could be the fact that he doesn't regard the desire for women. Men have a desire for women, but he's not going to regard that desire. You know any religions that man exalts himself to the point of being God above all gods and does not regard the desire for women? I can think of one. Nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces. That's not talking about our God. The God of forces is Mars. It's the God of war, which, if you study that out, is talking about Satan. And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. Now, you can take that and you can cross-reference that with Revelation chapter 17, and you're going to have a pretty good understanding of exactly what he's talking about. But we don't have time to go there. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push against him, talking about Egypt, and the king of the north shall come against him, talking about probably Russia there, come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. Now watch this. He shall also enter into the glorious land. So he's going to, just like Antiochus Epiphanes, he's going to be opposed and enter into Israel, the glorious land. And many countries shall he be overthrown. Why? Because of war. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. That's all land that belongs to Israel. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, in the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all precious things of Egypt and of the Libyans, and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore shall he go forth with great fury, to destroy and utterly to make away many. Now watch this here, verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas, talking about between the Great Sea and the Dead Sea, in the glorious holy mountain. Where would that be? That's Jerusalem. It's the holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So he's going to come into Jerusalem. He's going to plant his palaces there. And it says he's going to come to his end, and none shall help him. What does that mean? He's going to die. Remember in Revelation chapter 13, the Antichrist, what happens to one of his heads? It's wounded unto death. Well, this is exactly what happens. And what happens in Revelation chapter 13? He's resurrected. So, let's watch this. Verse 12, chapter 12, verse 1. This is all one thought here. And at that time, at what time? At the time when he comes in, plants his palaces in the holy mountain, shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. You see, Michael, the archangel, is a principality. Hey, we're going to talk about that this Wednesday and on Wednesday night. Michael is a principality. He has authority to protect the people of Israel. But at this time, it says he's going to stand up. It means he's going to cease fighting. It means he's going to come to attention and cease fighting. And watch what happens. And there shall be time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even at that same time. And at that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So notice what he says here. Here comes that great tribulation. It's a time of trouble such as never was and never shall be. But your people will be saved. That's the whole point. Now watch verse 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. That's the first resurrection. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. And they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Talking about the understanding of the prophecies. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, talking about angels, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man, clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth forever and ever, it shall be for a time, that's one, times, that's 2.5. So that's 3.5. For 3.5 times, or 3.5 years. That's how long this is going to go on. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel. For the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, talking about the Jewish people. But the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Now watch this, verse 11 here. Here it is. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, remember in Daniel chapter 9, the daily sacrifice is taken away. And the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So he adds on to that final 3.5 years, 1,260, an additional 30 days. This is for the judgment of the nations, if you remember back to our study of Daniel. And then verse 12, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. So he adds an additional 45 days for the purifying of the nation and for the setting up of the millennium. But go thy way till the end be. Thou shalt rest and shalt stand in thy lot at the end of the day. So Daniel's going to have a particular place in this. So this is the pattern for the Antichrist. This abomination of desolation does not speak of anything that has happened yet that Jesus is speaking of here in Matthew 24. Let's go back. So the time is coming when a king is going to come into the Holy Land. He will have already confirmed the covenant. But after 3.5 years of that, he's going to come into the Holy Land. He's going to plant his palaces there in Jerusalem. He's going to cause the sacrifice to cease. And he's going to exalt himself above every god. So now that means something. We'll look more at that later, but that implies something. That there has to be a rebuilding of the temple. There's no temple in Jerusalem today. Has been for 2,000 years. So notice here in your notes, it's important to note that all of this occurs in the temple at Jerusalem. Luke 21 presents the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, calling it the desolation. In Luke 21, nothing stood in the temple making it desolate. Rather, the temple was destroyed. Jesus also told us that the destruction of Jerusalem would take place before all these things he describes in Matthew 24. So if the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and in the future the abomination of desolation will take place in the temple, that can only mean one thing. The temple must be rebuilt. They're trying to do that right now. From what I understand, they have everything that they need. They have a cornerstone for the temple. They have a priesthood. They have all the instruments. They're just waiting on the Ark of the Covenant, and they can't do anything with that until Messiah shows up. That's what they're waiting for. And in order to because Gentiles are there, they have to purify, because that Mosque of Omar is there, and the Golden Dome of the Rock is there. All that whole Temple Mount area has to be purified in order to sanctify the priesthood and in order to build the temple. Well, what's required for the sanctifying of the priesthood and the ground for the temple is the ashes of a red heifer. Well, they have, I think it's 6 or 7 of them in Jerusalem right now. They came from Texas. I think that's pretty funny. But it was a really big deal because they've had, over the centuries, red heifers have shown up, but they always develop some sort, as they mature, they develop some sort of white spot of some kind or another type of color spot. And these have to be inspected. They have to be entirely white from head to toe. Head to tail would be entirely red, not one spot of any other color. And these ones that showed up are that. And they haven't changed colors yet. And so the people of Israel are pretty excited. They're saying, these are the days of Messiah. Well, why? Because now they can actually sanctify the ground. They just have to figure out a way to get rid of that golden dome of the rock. Well, that's what's going to take place here. This is what we're getting ready to look at now. So let's go to Revelation chapter 11. Because Revelation chapter 11 speaks of some of these events. And so we're going to have to, I got to hurry because I got to finish this now that I started. So Revelation chapter 11, here we have an event that is showing, this is taking place at the middle of the tribulation, but we're getting kind of a little bit of history of something that's been going on prior to that, leading up to this point. So Revelation chapter 11, verse number 1. It says, there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, in the holy city shall they trod under foot 42 months. So we get kind of an idea of what's going to happen. For the temple to be rebuilt, they're going to somehow figure out a way that they can compromise and allow that mosque to take up the court of the Gentiles. I don't know how they're going to work that out, but somehow they're going to work that out. And so it's going to be for 3.5 years. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. This is the first 3.5 years that's being described there. These are the 2 olive trees, the 2 candlesticks, standing before the God of the earth. And if any man shall hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devour their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over the waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with the plagues, and as often as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom in Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. That's Jerusalem. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on them which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour was there a great earthquake. And the 10th part of the city fell in the earthquake, were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. So here we have the temple in Jerusalem, and for 3.5 years you have these 2 witnesses that are prophesying. And I'm going to just briefly get into this. Let's go to Zechariah, because this is where we get a glimpse of who these 2 men are, a little bit better understanding of what they're doing. These 2 prophets that come on the scene, these 2 witnesses, going to Zechariah chapter 4, are going to be the instruments that God uses to get this temple built. Because if a Jew were to walk into Jerusalem today and say, we're going to start building our temple right now, what do you think is going to happen? you're going to have a bunch of Arabs come out with guns and start shooting at them. You're going to have people throwing stones and bottle rockets and all these things. And you're just going to have the same thing that's been going on in Israel for centuries. But when these two witnesses come in, what does it say is going to happen? It says, fire proceedeth out of their mouth to kill their enemies. And if you try to hurt them, in the same manner you try to hurt them, you're going to be killed. There's just no stopping these two men. The world is going to be too afraid to do anything to them. And so in verse 4 of Revelation, it says that there are the two olive trees and two candlesticks that stand before the Lord of the whole earth. Well, that takes us back here to Zechariah chapter 4. And so let's look here at Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 14. It says, Then said he, These are the two anointed ones that stand before the Lord of the whole earth. So what two? Who are these two men? It's a reference to Joshua and to Zerubbabel. And so if you go back here to chapter 3 of Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8. Hear now, O Joshua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I bring forth my servant, the branch. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, even one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. Okay, so we have Joshua there. He was the high priest that was high priest at the time when Israel is being rebuked for not building the temple. Remember, Israel was sent back and they could build their temple, and when they laid the platform, the old people, noticed this is smaller than the temple of Solomon that was destroyed by the Babylonians. And so they began to weep. They began to cry out, because this isn't what we were expecting. They were expecting the temple that Ezekiel prophesied that was going to be much larger than what Solomon's temple was. And so for years, I think it was 16 years, the platform just sat there and they didn't do anything with it. They started building their own homes with the material that was supposed to be used for the temple. And so now in Haggai and in Zechariah, they are being rebuked for not building God's temple. And so they begin to build this temple again, and Joshua is the high priest at the time, leading the people and encouraging the people in that. And then in chapter 4, Zerubbabel is the ruler of Jerusalem, who is sent by the Assyrians to oversee the building of the temple. Okay, so you see the connection between these two and the two witnesses. Notice here, Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. Then he answered and spake unto me, saying, This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it. And thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. Who hath despised the day of small things? So he's referring back to that smaller platform. They despise it. But why are you despising the day of small things? This is something that God's doing for Israel. For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth. Then answered I and said unto him, What are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof? I answered again and said unto him, What be these 2 olive branches, which through the golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, Knowest thou not what these be? And I said, No, my Lord. Then said he, These are the 2 anointed ones that stand before the Lord of the whole earth. Now let's look down here. So we have these 2 men at the time of Zechariah that the Lord had commissioned to rebuild the temple. They're the two anointed ones. They're the two olive trees. They're the candlesticks that is referred to in Revelation. Now, it's not going to be Joshua and Zerubbabel that come. And we know from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that the Antichrist is going to come into a built temple called the house of God. He's going to exalt himself and declare himself to be God. And that's going to be the abomination of desolation. So who are these two witnesses? While there is some speculation, it seems clear that it's going to be Moses and Elijah. Now, how do we know that? Well, Elijah is very easy. There's not much speculation or debate on Elijah coming. Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. That's before Jesus returns to the earth. He shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Now watch this. It's interesting that James makes reference to this as well. James chapter 5, verse 17 and 18. Elias, or Elijah, was a man subject to like passions we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. And it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. Isn't that interesting how that's so particular? How long are the two witnesses going to be prophesying for? 3 years and 6 months. 1,260 days. 40 and 2 months. Okay, now notice here. Now some might say that Enoch is one of the witnesses, and the reason he became popular is because he's one of the only two men that did not die. And people have this idea that, well, since he didn't die, he has to be it because anybody else couldn't be, because it's appointed a man once to die. And that's totally taken out of context. There's lots of people who died twice. How many people did Jesus resurrect from the dead while he was during his earthly ministry? What happened to them? What happened to Dorcas when she was resurrected from the dead? She died again. And it certainly wasn't a bummer for her. She was probably upset that she's back. So lots of people died again. So that argument's out. Some people say it's John the Beloved, the Apostle John, and but I'm pretty sure it's Moses. And here's why. If you notice here, Exodus 7:19, Lord spake unto Moses, saying to Aaron, take thy rod, stretch forth thine hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams, upon their rivers, upon their ponds, upon all their pools of water, that they may become blood. And that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. Chapter 9, verse 14, I will at this time send all my plagues upon thine heart, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in the earth. Now watch, Revelation 11:6, about these two witnesses again. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, for 3.5 years, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will. Well, that certainly sounds like Moses and Elijah. It's also interesting. It says that there are the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And we see in parallel to this in Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 to 4. You remember the Mount of Transfiguration. Who appeared to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration? Moses and Elijah. And it says they're standing with him. And it's also interesting because when Peter wakes up, and if you miss the context of what's going on, when Peter stands up, what does Peter say? It's good that we've been here. Let's build 3 tabernacles. One for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Is there significance to the tabernacles? He's saying, well, let's just camp out here. No, what's he saying? Let's initiate the kingdom right here. So even Peter understood, and the people of Israel at that time, there was an understanding that when Messiah comes to establish his kingdom, Moses and Elijah were going to be there. And so when Peter sees Moses and Elijah there with the Lord, he's putting 2 and 2 together, and he's saying, this must be when the kingdom's going to be set up. This fits. Well, we're out of time, so let's go ahead and pray, and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you for the Word of God. I pray that you'd help us to be faithful students, to understand it. And Lord, while there's a lot of interesting things when it comes about prophecy, I pray most of all that we'd be stirred to be better witnesses for you and a better testimony, and that we would seek to persuade people to flee from the wrath to come. Pray that you'd bless now as we prepare our hearts for the next hour. Pray that you'd bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen.